Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. I want to thank you for being here today for a very exciting and historic moment for 1911 Historic Cultural Center and the city of Lake Charles. Before we really get going, I do want to recognize a few that are joined dignitaries with us today. We do have Mark Eckerd, President of the City Council, Carl Brookhouse, Superintendent of the School Board, City Councilman Stuart Weatherford, and George Swift, the President and CEO of the Chamber Alliance. Gentlemen, thank you all for joining us today. We also have a few members of our Mayor's Armed Forces Commission. Gentlemen, if you are a member of the Mayor's Armed Forces Commission, or ladies, would you please stand and be recognized? Thank you. And while he doesn't deserve applause just for himself, because he was a little late, I did see that Brian Beam just showed up, the administrator. No, he doesn't deserve applause. He was a couple minutes late. Thank you, Brian. We appreciate you being here, and we also appreciate that we have CGov here today, I believe, and others who will be filming and making sure that everyone gets this exciting news. On December 8, 1941, just one day after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States officially entered World War II. Louisiana, however, was already front and center in the country's defense preparations. From 1940 to 1945, the state hosted the largest maneuvers in U.S. military history, witnessed massive changes to its industrial base, and saw its citizens become enthusiastic contributors to what President Franklin Delano Roosevelt called the arsenal of democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, I am thrilled, honored, and humbled to announce that the Pelican State Goes to War, Louisiana in World War II, an exhibit produced by the National WWII Museum, is coming to 1911 Historic City Hall and Cultural Center right here in Lake Charles. At this time, I'd like to ask the President of the Mayor's Armed Forces Commission, Charles Dalglish, to tell us a few more details about this exciting announcement. Charles, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Mayor Hunter. The Pelican State Goes to War, Louisiana, World War II, will be hosted right here at the 1911 Historic City Hall and Cultural Center from August the 2nd to October the 19th. The exhibit will feature artifacts, photographs, and oral histories that highlight Louisiana's contribution towards America achieving victory in World War II. Many citizens of Louisiana contributed to the victory in World War II. On the battlefield, with nearly 280,000 individuals from the state serving in the armed forces during the war. The Pelican State Goes to War will share the contributions, the stories of the Louisiana 6 Medal of Honor recipients, which represent the sacrifice and devotion of duty. The exhibit will also explore tales of the Louisiana home front, from the great mobilization effort of the Higgins boat industry and the first grader Billy Mitchell's scrap metal collection. On a personal note, my father, John Dalglish, served during World War II as a B-24 bombardier and navigator in the 8th Air Force. The men who flew B-24s and B-17s flew on missions that lasted 8 to 12 hours of constant combat in unpressurized aircraft at altitudes of 20 to 30,000 feet and temperatures of 20 to 70 degrees below zero. We should remember and honor the courage of these men and all they did to serve during World War II. As President of the Mayor's Armed Forces Commission, I invite all of Southwest Louisiana, citizens and service members and women alike, to take this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity right here in our backyard to honor the sacrifice and the contribution of this great state during World War II. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Charles. And of course, never to be outdone, the City of Lake Charles is going above and beyond to honor this momentous occasion. On September 5 at 6 o'clock p.m. at Tritico Theater on the McNeese campus, the City of Lake Charles and McNeese State University will be hosting a moderated panel led by John Bridges to discuss World War II and its effects on Southwest Louisiana. Panelists will be announced soon. The city is currently seeking local artifacts and relics specific to the Lake Charles region to accompany the special exhibit. Grant Leonards, who is this young man right here to my right, is a McNeese history student, and he is an intern here at the City of Lake Charles. He will catalog artifacts received from the community. Objects could include letters of commendation, medals or awards, uniforms, personal letters, war bonds, and stamps, or other items associated with the World War II era. Now, I'll ask you all to pay particular attention to this next slide because we will be revisiting a couple of these images before the end of the presentation. Made possible by Stein Lumber in honor of J.W. Stein, a World War II veteran, a wall of honor featuring photographs of local veterans who served in the war will be assembled. The public is invited to submit photographs of service members along with their respective branch of service, rank, dates served, and location of service. I believe we have with us today Ms. Patrice Charles with Stein. Patrice, please stand and be recognized. Thank you to Stein Lumber. Now, both artifacts and photographs can be submitted in person at Historic City Hall and Cultural Center, right here at 1001 Ryan Street on Monday through Friday between 1 and 4:30 p.m. Photographs can also be emailed to Grant Leonards at grant.leonards, grant.leonards at cityoflc.us. For more information on submitting artifacts or the Wall of Honor, please do not text Nick Hunter. Please email Grant Leonards or call 491-9147. Now, the city worked with the Calcasieu Parish School Board television production program led by Brittany Glazer-Felder to record numerous oral histories. Those interviewed include General Urban Wise, a World War II veteran, E.K. Hunter, son of the late Judge Edwin F. Hunter Jr., a World War II veteran, and Jim Beam, reporter for the Lake Charles American Press. The video documentary was recorded and produced by Felder's high school students, and it will play alongside the exhibit at Historic City Hall. At this time, I'm going to offer you a sneak peek into what you can see, and I want you to remember, high school students.
I spent almost 2 years in England before they had the invasion, and so they selected our group to go in on the beachhead there, and so we had to go with them, and so I got on the boat and started over, and it was pretty nice. But when we got on the other side, we had to climb over the side and get on a landing craft and wade ashore, and the Germans were shooting at us, and all our ships were shooting at them, and so bullets were going over us, and we were going on these landing craft. So we got over there and got landed, and took over an old French farmhouse, and knocked down some rows in there and so forth, and made a little runway for the B-17s. In Normandy there, they had all kind of foxholes and everything. And we'd set up pup tents to live in, and we dug. I had a trench right behind my old pup tent, and they'd fire rounds on it. And you'd hear a shot coming, and you stop a minute. It's going to hit short. It's going to go over your head, or you're going to hit it with you. You could tell the sound of the thing. So if it sounded like it's coming close, boy, you roll out and got in that hole, and it'd hit somewhere around you there.
He was initially signed to the Saratoga, which was CV-3. And that CV-3 lets you know what a low number it is. The Saratoga was a Lexington-class carrier, but it was one of the first carriers, and actually the Navy had developed its carrier tactics just before the war by using the Lex and the Saratoga as the ships to prove what they were going to do. His battle station on the Saratoga was the anti-aircraft guns. So, you know, he's like all line officers, he took his time at the helm and doing various things. But when battle stations sounded, his task was to command the anti-aircraft guns.
I guess you could say the war made us a big petrochemical complex here, and it's responsible for the great economic development that's going on here right now. You know, the first plant here was in the late 1930s, Matheson Alkali, but then you had City Service and Sitcon and Firestone. They all came in here, and mainly because of the war effort. And of course they grew, you know, tremendously after the war, but it really fueled our local, it made us an industrialized area here, it really did.
So ladies and gentlemen, if you think that is worthy of some applause, I'm going to invite several people to stand at the moment. Brittany Glazer Felder, Jevin Pierce, Julia Gutierrez, and Jasmine Simeon are here today, and they helped produce this video. Pretty spectacular. Our sponsors are pivotal for this exhibit and other works of the Mayor's Armed Forces Commission. I'd like to invite at this time E.K. Hunter with Hunter, Hunter & Saunier attorneys at law to the podium. Hunter, Hunter & Saunier, thank you for your sponsorship.
So I always have to say, Nick Hunter, no relation, but the truth of the matter is we really love him and sort of adopt him anyway. You know, we're happy to say.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you to the City of Lake Charles for helping us remember the World War II veterans. I'm not a baby boomer. I'm a pre-baby boomer. I'm actually a World War II baby. You know, and my mother's fondest experience was when I was 18 months old. She took me on a cross-country trip from Shreveport, Louisiana to Seattle when my father's ship was in. So that was my first really major traveling. And I just really do appreciate it. I just want to say one thing that's sort of unrelated. So my son, actually, both of his grandfathers were in the Navy. My father had the good fortune of being on a rather large ship and two very large ships, and although they were hit with enemy fire and a couple of dud torpedoes from some submarines that didn't quite work the way they should have, thank goodness. But his just wanted to mention his other grandfather, which was Judge M.D. Miller from Jennings. Judge Miller was a naval aviator. He was shot down near the end of the war and spent 14 months as a Japanese prisoner of war. And many of you probably remember Judge Miller. I know Dr. Molizant does because they're close family friends. So in any case, I want to say thank you again, Nick. This was a great thing for those of us to keep the torch going for our World War II veterans. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, EK and EF. Thank you all for joining us today. Also, I'd like to invite Dana Keel with CITGO. Dana and CITGO, thank you for your sponsorship.
It's CITGO's pleasure to be a part of this cultural event, to remember why we were built here in the community. Many of you may know that City Service was built to produce the aviation fuel for the aircraft in World War II. And thus, 75 years later, here we are today, still bowling all, as we say, and fueling our community. But also with that, I want to say that it's so great to be a part of this memorable event, coming to our area and not having to travel so far, especially for our veterans that served in that war, to go all the way to New Orleans to be able to see it, that we're bringing it right here to our community. Thank the city for doing that. And
thank you. And I don't think we have I know we have a a photographer with the American Press here. Thank you. And I know John Guidros is here, but I don't think a speaker from the American Press. But American Press is one of our sponsors. Thank you to the American Press. Ladies and gentlemen, before we close, I think it would be appropriate for us to solemnly remember that while we today look back on World War II as perhaps a topic to be taught at McNeese or something to be studied in a history book or an exhibit at a museum, it was a painfully real and ultimately personal thing for many of our community here in Southwest Louisiana. Many members of our community fought bravely. They protected the arsenal of democracy. They dealt a heavy blow to fascism, yet they paid the ultimate price, and many never returned home after they answered the call to arms. Many of their family members still live in our community today. Perhaps some in this very room have a family member or a friend who died during World War II. So we must always remember. We must remember men like Alvin Joseph Molozan of Lake Arthur. Alvin graduated from LSU in 1942 with honors, with a bachelor's degree in accounting and administration. In that same ceremony, he was commissioned through the LSU ROTC program as a second lieutenant. His last duty assignment before being deployed overseas in August of 1944 was that of commanding officer of a training company at Fort Lewis, Washington. He was assigned as a replacement officer to Company K, 119th Infantry Regiment, 30th Division. He served under General Omar Bradley's First Army. On October 10, 1944, Alvin died in Aachen, Germany, right before the Battle of the Bulge, at the age of 24. He was laid to rest in Belgium at the Henri Chapelle American Cemetery. This cemetery contains 7,987 American war dead and covers 57 acres. It is one of 3 American war cemeteries in Belgium. In Lake Arthur today, there is a monument in his honor that lays on his parents' graves. Multiple family members today have the middle name Joseph in honor of Alvin Joseph Molozan. And at the time of his mother's death, on June 12, 1989, she was 105 years old and was the oldest living Gold Star mother. And we must remember men like Charles A. Mayfield. Charles A. Mayfield enlisted in the U.S. Navy. The armed services were segregated at that time, and although some African Americans were assigned to combat roles, most were tasked with combat support duties, such as transportation, supplies, and construction engineering. Charles was assigned to the Quinault Victory, a ship that was moored at Port Chicago, California. An explosion on the ship occurred on July 17, 1944. It was the worst disaster on the home front during World War II. The explosion killed 320 men, mostly black sailors, who were ammunition's loaders. A sister, years later, Janice Mayfield Sanford, remembered, "We heard about the explosion a day or so before we got the telegram. When Mama heard, she said, 'Lord, I hope my son is not among those who was killed.'" Unfortunately, Mrs. Mayfield's worst fear had become a reality. Charles Mayfield perished in this explosion. Miss Sanford also recalled, a buddy of his later told us that Charles was supposed to have been off that day, but a friend asked him to change watches with him. He did, and so he was on board that ship when it blew up. Rufus Mayfield, Charles's brother, said years later, "When the telegraph came, my mother was at work at J.A. Foster's on Kirkman Street. When I called him, Mr. Foster told me to get my mother and bring her home. She was absolutely hysterical. It was really bad for her. She had not wanted Charles to go into the Navy, but from the time he was 17, he begged and begged for her to sign for him." Today, Charles is buried at the Reeves CME Church Cemetery in Lake Charles. The Mayfield Taylor McCain American Legion Post 551 is named partially in his honor. Now, ladies and gentlemen, a Gold Star family member is a family relative of someone who has died during battle. I want to stress right now that the proper acknowledgement of a Gold Star family member is not applause, but a moment of silence. And we do have some members of the Molazan family and a nephew of Charles Mayfield with us today. I see Lyle Sanford standing in the back, Mr. Mayfield's nephew. And at this time, I would like to invite also to stand members of the Molazan family. Ione Molazan Broussard, Constance Darbone, Dr. Lee J. Molazan, and Ann Molazan. I invite us all to stand please to the Molazan family only, and a moment of silence. Thank you all. Thank you. I also want to mention that Ed Hudson is here today representing both the Mayor's Armed Forces Commission, and Ed is also a member of the Mayfield Taylor McCain American Legion Post 551. Ed, thank you for joining us today as well. And now, how fitting is it that we hold this press conference today on June 6th, 2019, I almost said 1944, but it's June 6, 2019. 75 years ago, on June 6, 1944, over 5,000 Allied ships and over 800 Allied planes carried men and vehicles across the English Channel for the invasion of Normandy, D-Day. Over 100,000 men made it ashore that day, and many thousands died in the effort. So, ladies and gentlemen, citizens and visitors, students and adults, those who lived during those times and those who wish to honor those who did, I invite all of you to the Pelican State Goes to War, Louisiana and World War II, right here in Lake Charles. Visit and learn about history. Visit and honor those who served. Visit and see how men like Charles Mayfield and Alvin Joseph Molazan contributed to the arsenal of democracy and helped assure that we maintain the liberties that we so cherish today. This truly will be an awe-inspiring event. Thank you all for joining us today.